This is a different opponent. You know, with Alabama, I don't think you necessarily – the defense was, you kind of knew what a Nick Saban offense is. You know what he's going to try and do. You know you had to prepare for a Milroe to run, but I don't think it was quite the same as Jalon Daniels. Jalon Daniels is a bit more dynamic than Milroe. He can hit those little passes in the middle. He's a little bit more experienced. He's going to be able to know how to play you. In a young Anthony Hill, he is going to try and get Anthony Hill to overcommit. He is going to try very hard to get him to overcommit. So you need to be able to stay on your numbers, stay on your guy, and not get beat on this. Because those third downs, if it's 3rd and 8, and he goes and picks that up, that's a killer for this defense. Sark talked about on Monday preparing for Jalon Daniels. He was asked, how are you doing in the scout team? He was asked if Savion Red would be playing a lot of quarterback because of mobility. But that's the thing. Jalon Daniels is not just a running quarterback, and that's kind of where the problems arise.
Well, I think it's multiple. You know, the thing that he does is he's a real dual threat. You know, I think the natural thing is we think about the runs that he has for explosive plays, but he throws the ball all over the place, and they've got great schemes and concepts. It's not, you know, by any means is it gimmicky. You know, they're running real pass concepts that stress your coverages, and then they have the run concepts with his legs as an added element to it. You know, the +1 runs with the quarterback run. So he taxes you both ways. So it's not like you can just have a guy be a scout team quarterback that's a runner. You have to have the ability to throw it to give the defense a realistic look about what they're going to be going up against.
So you have to give the offense or the defense something to look at, because it's not just, if you just put Savion Red back there and he runs the outside, you know, okay, we can stay in front of him, and that linebacker can come up and overcommit, and the cornerback can overcommit, and you don't expect that Jalon Daniels is going to pop the ball right over your head and get down and get another 17, 18 yards on a pass, and then you have to have your safety come over and help you out. And your safeties are going to be playing back because they're going to be trying not to get beat over the top. So that's really where the problem is, trying to prepare for this Kansas team, is Jalon Daniels can beat you moving and throwing, something you haven't seen this year, something you're probably not really going to see at that level for the rest of the season, unless you play Kansas again in the Big 12 championship game. Dylan Gabriel doesn't hold the same skill set. So you've had some mobile quarterbacks, but I don't know if they have the passing ability as much as this team does. Now, another factor we've talked about in this game, that this Texas offense especially, but the defense as well, has seemed at home against Rice and against Wyoming to not necessarily have the discipline needed, right? Like they haven't really been as disciplined as you would like to be able to see this team be at home, because on the road they've been great. Here's Sark talking about the penalties at home versus on the road, where you should be better at home, right? And this is something you want to see cleaned up in this game as well against Kansas, is clean up some of these penalties of the false starts that are going to put you behind the line, and especially jumping off sides, any defensive holdings, pass interference against Jalon Daniels. Plays may last a little bit longer, so you need to be on point on that defensive end to be able to stop the plays from Jalon Daniels.
Yeah, and really the one on the road was at the end of the game. You know, that was really disappointing. Well, I think that goes back to mental intensity. I think that goes back to focus. You know, you're going on the road, and we talk so much about, hey, we're going to shift, we're going to motion, we're going to do the things that we do. You know, pre-snap focus is really important, and poise and composure is really important. Well, we come home, and maybe as coaches, we're not emphasizing that enough. And maybe we're taking it for granted, and the players are taking it for granted a little bit too much, and we're having some of those false starts and issues there. So, you know, we got to get back to emphasizing that we have to use our pre-snap, you know, motions and shifts and things that we do to our advantage, and we can't stub our own toe. So part of me wants to tell our fans to scream and yell Saturday when we take the field, so we got to focus in a little bit more. But all kidding aside, I think it's about, you know, we need to place an emphasis on it like anything, and we need to make sure that we got the right mental intensity and focus in that area of the game, and not take it for granted. Oh, we're at home, I can't flinch. No, we've got to focus in and trust our cadence and what we're doing.
And that's kind of the bigger message, right? You have to test your focus, that the first two opponents, maybe that was part of it, that Rice and Wyoming, why they were a little bit closer, is you were so worried about the Alabama game. You're worried about starting Big 12 on the road in Baylor, you know, not knowing before the season where Baylor was going to be. That you maybe kind of let up on those home games because you thought, oh, we're telling them on the away games, they'll know on the home games. Well, this is a big game. This is the biggest game you've played since Alabama. It'll be the third biggest game of the season as we can look at it right now because it's the only other ranked team you're playing as of right now. K-State, TCU may jump into the rankings at some point. Someone else may. Who knows? But I think that is a big factor of really trying to keep the discipline going. We know they called the players-only meeting after Alabama and then still didn't have the greatest showing, but I think that's part of it. It's all part of this team staying on, that leadership being up. And one of the things you can talk about this leadership is not everybody on this leadership committee was here 3 years ago when Sark's first year and Kansas came in and beat Texas to DKR. Something you never wanted to see happen, right? But it happened. And some of these players are talking about it, and the press is definitely talking about it. We know Kansas a few years ago, much different team now, much better team now. But you have to talk about, well, what do you remember, and how much do you try to push in to this narrative that Texas is playing a Kansas team that came in and kind of ruined your season and really put a sour taste in your mouth? They're the people who got Charlie Strong fired. They've been a thorn in your side for the last few years. Lance Leipold has taken this team to another level. How do you teach your team to be focused and treat it like any other game? But also, some of these players may have some residual hatred. And I'll tell you what's funny about this. I can't remember which one of these clips it is, so we're going to play both of them. But I'll tell you something that's interesting about Sark's mentality and this team mentality that has changed that I really like. Here's Sark talking about remembering losing to Kansas.
I think this much, I kind of referenced into the team this morning. We've come a long way as a program, and in a lot of phases. Schematically, the roster, the culture, the environment at DKR. We don't have to go backwards. We're going to keep forging forward, and we've got a lot of goals that we're trying to obtain this year, and we're trying to reach. We recognize Kansas is a good football team. But to try to make our guys feel bad for losing a game 2 years ago that it sucked for everybody, I don't know what benefit that is. We got to focus on the task at hand, and that's playing this Kansas team, because this Kansas team is a lot different than that Kansas team 2 years ago as well.
So this is what I like about this. Sark basically, last year, if you remember, there was a bit of the narrative at the beginning of that season was this is the revenge tour. We're going back on the Big 12, and everybody thought we sucked last year. Well, hey, guess what? We almost beat Alabama, and now we're coming in to whoop up on the Big 12. That was the narrative, the revenge tour. We talked about it. On Ball Don't Lie, we talked about, man, they're going on the revenge tour. They're going through the Big 12, and they're going to show up to those schools that beat them, and they're going to embarrass them. And what happened? They didn't. They won some games. They weren't terrible, but they definitely weren't that. And I think Sark knows, hey, man, that was last year. That was what I needed to pump them up because I knew they weren't ready yet. I could say Big 12 championship, but I didn't. Big 12 is I couldn't push bigger picture yet because I knew we probably weren't there yet. I want us to be there, and if we were, we'd start pushing it. But I'm not coming out of the gates doing that. I like that this year it's the John Wick. It's not revenge. It's not the revenge mentality of these guys beat us 3 years ago or last year, and we're going to go prove that we're better. I don't need to prove anything to you. I need to prove it to myself. I need to prove it to the country. I need to prove that we are the best team in college football. And we need to go out and show that. I like that mentality much better. Everyone against us. It's not just the teams that beat us. It's not that we need motivation against you personally. We need motivation for ourselves. I like that mentality much better about this Texas team going up against a Kansas. If you go into it thinking we got to show Kansas what's up, you're going to play to Kansas's level. And we all know we don't want Texas to play to the other team's level. Texas is a better team than Kansas. They have better players than Kansas. So you need to play to your level. And that's where I like the mentality change from last year to this year in that statement. No, this is not about remembering the Kansas game from 2021. This is not about getting revenge in front of our home fans. That's not about any of that. We're coming out to go beat you. We're coming out to beat you and beat every single team on our schedule. It's not a revenge tour. This is because it ain't about you anymore. It's about Texas now. And I love that mentality shift. I do love that mentality shift. And I think that's kind of one of the things that I respect about Kansas and Lance Leipold. And why I think that this game, why they'll have a good approach in this game, why they'll come at it, but he's one of the few coaches who I haven't heard come out as much and say, this is the game you got to circle on your schedule. This isn't that. I don't think Lance Leipold's doing that. I think Lance Leipold knows, hey, man, let's go win. Let's go win double-digit games. Let's go win 9-10 games this season. Let's go try and get a shot at the Big 12 championship. We may not be able to, we may have a tough run against a Texas or an Oklahoma, but you know what? Oklahoma or Texas, they could stumble too. And guess who's going to be sitting waiting there? Kansas State. We can beat them. We can beat TCU. We can get in that Big 12 championship game. And then who knows what can happen? I think he's looking bigger picture too, so that's why I like Sark being in that position. Here's Sark talking about Lance Leipold and building Kansas, because that to me is one of the more interesting factors, as this game for a lot of fans means more than to these guys, which it means a lot, but I think they both have bigger aspirations than just this game.
Well, I think what's impressed me is, they're kind of similar to us in some degree in that, you're in year 3, and as I've touched on, we have players in our program that we inherited that stuck to and didn't decide to go in the portal and have become really good players for us, and I think have become really good players for them too, and so they become catalysts for you. I think they've done a good job utilizing the transfer portal. Like if you look at their defensive front right now, their front 4, which is really about a front 10, they rotate a lot of guys. They're all transfers. And so in this day and age of the portal, you're able to fill those voids and those needs that you may have on your roster. And I think they've done a nice job of that. And then I think they've done a really good job of implementing their schemes on both sides of the ball. They haven't said after year 1 when things weren't perfect for them, scrap that and we're going to go to a whole nother offense or a whole nother defense. They've stayed true to who they were as coaches, and now they've got veterans that really understand the nuances of their scheme and they play like it. So a lot of credit to them. As I say, I think very similar to us. I think they held true to who they were. They raised the players in the program and the culture that they have, and then they utilize the portal to fill the needs that they have.
That's really, to me, the biggest story is that this is 2 teams that are on very similar trajectories. Kansas just started way behind where Texas was. Texas was not a terrible program when Sark came in. Texas was a decent program. He kind of took them back a few steps to reload and change the culture and put it where he wanted to be.